Before visual effects filled the gaps between stunts and storyboards, there was another way to make action. Just do it. These 10 films were made by people who saw the car not as a prop, but as a character. And not just any character, but one that had to be driven hard, filmed close, and understood deeply. The stories told here weren't always clean or safe, but that's what gave them weight. These weren't idealized heroes. They were outsiders, misfits, or loners, pushing metal down the road with nowhere else to go. In Vanishing Point 1971, director Richard C. Sarafian created a film where the central force isn't a person, it's velocity. Barry Newman's character Kowalski has little dialogue, few interactions, and no clear goal beyond reaching San Francisco in a hurry. But the vehicle, the 1970 Dodge Challenger, is present in nearly every frame. Sarafian drew inspiration from a real-life incident, where a California man was killed in a high-speed chase after refusing to stop for police. In the film's final scene, a crash into a bulldozer blockade was staged using a 1967 Camaro disguised as the Challenger. For dynamic shots, cinematographer John Alonzo mounted compact Aeroflex 2 cameras directly onto vehicles. Several scenes had to be reshot when continuity errors revealed unexpected passengers or crew reflections. Shooting on public roads without permits caused the crew to face real risks. One incident nearly resulted in a crash when a civilian driver broke through a traffic closure. Gone in 60 Seconds, 1974, wasn't just a film directed by H.B. Halicki. It was the thing he lived through. Not in a metaphorical sense, but in the most literal way possible. Halicki didn't use a second unit. He didn't rely on stunt coordinators. He didn't even use a real script. Scenes were outlined hours before they were shot. Dialogue was improvised. One entire sequence, the one labeled Dust Bowl, was planned using a cardboard circle and a rough sketch. Most of the cars weren't props, they were salvaged wrecks bought from city auctions, sometimes the day before filming. He spent around $200 per vehicle and parked them in a vacant lot outside his garage until it was time to crash them. The movie's central event, a 40-minute chase that crosses 5 cities, wasn't pre-visualized or blocked using storyboards. Halicki and a handful of friends worked out the beats by driving through real intersections, often without permission. What they couldn't rehearse, they just committed to film. In one take, a police car hits a pole and snaps in half. That wasn't planned. The impact was real. So was the injury Halicki sustained when his Mustang took a ramp too hard and landed with enough force to compress his spine. He refused to stop. He got up, reset the car, and finished the shot. Some of the chaos captured in the movie wasn't acting. Pedestrians who appear in the background weren't told a film was in progress. In a few scenes, people ran toward the wreckage, assuming they were witnessing an actual accident. That confusion became part of the film's texture. None of it was polished, and none of it was safe. But it worked, because every second of it was real. In Christine, 1983, director John Carpenter adapted Stephen King's novel about a possessed 1958 Plymouth Fury and kept the tone stark, deliberate, and grounded. The film avoids excess, relying on mood and precision to convey its horror. The protagonist, Arnie, begins as a meek, bullied teen who slowly transforms into someone cold and unrecognizable after restoring the broken-down car he finds in a junkyard. That transformation is reflected in the car's own journey, from rusted shell to predatory machine. The production team built 24 versions of Christine, each in different states of damage and repair, with specific cars used only for crashing or for transformation scenes. The car's self-healing effect was achieved practically using hydraulics and flexible bodywork, filmed in reverse and carefully edited to look seamless. 2 vehicles survived filming and are now preserved by collectors. Carpenter directed the film without irony. There's no winking at the audience. The horror comes from the tone, the silence, the symmetry. Even the soundtrack, composed by Carpenter himself, emphasizes tension over spectacle. Actress Alexandra Paul, who played Lee, refused to eat meat during a scene where her character nearly chokes on a hamburger. She concealed the patty under the bun and bit around it. A cameo by George Thorogood, filmed for the ending, was cut entirely due to weak performances from both him and a key crew member. Ronin, 1998, directed by John Frankenheimer, brought a level of realism to car chases that few films since have matched. Known for his earlier work on Grand Prix, Frankenheimer insisted that all driving scenes be performed in real cars on actual roads, with no green screens and no digital enhancement. The story itself, about mercenaries hunting for a mysterious briefcase, is deliberately vague, allowing the characters and action to take center stage. Robert De Niro, Jean Reno, Natasha McElhone, and others anchor the film with deadpan performances and clipped, believable dialogue. The car chases, particularly those in Paris and Nice, used modified Peugeots and BMWs that were gutted and rebuilt to allow 2 drivers, one for performance, one for camera continuity. This setup allowed actors to appear to be driving while professionals handled the complex maneuvers. More than 300 stunt drivers were hired to fill out background traffic and to play oncoming vehicles in high-risk scenes. One sequence where cars raced the wrong way through tight European streets required every turn, skid, and near miss to be timed down to fractions of a second. Cars were repainted and rebuilt between shots to match continuity, and custom rigs were built for interior dialogue scenes. French authorities gave rare permission for the crew to fire live blanks on Paris streets, breaking long-standing city ordinances. The result was a film that didn't just look real, it felt real, down to every scrape and shudder. Duel 1971 began as a made-for-TV movie. Steven Spielberg was 24 when he directed it. The story follows a commuter, played by Dennis Weaver, who was stalked by an unseen truck driver. The truck, a Peterbilt 281, was aged and dirtied to feel almost organic. Spielberg personally selected it for its distinct grille, into which 17 notches were cut to imply a hidden backstory of past victims. The car, a red Plymouth Valiant, was chosen to pop against the beige desert. Duel was shot in just 13 days. Spielberg used forced perspective and telephoto lenses to make the truck appear faster and closer than it really was. The final shot, where the truck crashes off a cliff, nearly failed. A guiding rig snapped, but the stunt driver waited until the last possible second to jump out, ensuring the take was usable. Walter Hill's The Driver, 1978, is as sparse as car films get. Ryan O'Neal plays the unnamed driver, and Bruce Dern is the detective trying to catch him. The script includes only essential dialogue. The cars do the rest. A single Pontiac Trans Am was used for the film's final chase, meaning every stunt had to work on the first take. For rehearsals, Hill treated the driving scenes like choreography, more akin to dance than demolition. In one sequence, stunt driver Billy Burton crashed hard into a divider, causing panic on set. He walked away unscathed. At the time, the film struggled to find an audience, but years later its influence showed up in films like Drive 2011 and Baby Driver 2017. Two-Lane Blacktop 1971, directed by Monte Hellman, followed a minimalist structure. The story involves two young men, a driver and a mechanic, who drive a 1955 Chevy across the country, racing strangers and barely speaking. They pick up a hitchhiker, meet a boastful man in a GTO, and drive from town to town with no clear purpose. Filming took place along actual roads, in sequence, using three nearly identical 55 Chevys, each built for different types of shots. James Taylor, who played the driver, wasn't given the full script and received only his daily lines, making him uneasy. During filming, a drive shaft snapped and burst through the car's floor during a race scene. The cameraman who was supposed to be filming had stepped away to reload film and was spared serious injury. The Wraith 1986 is about a teen who is murdered by a gang of street racers and returns in a futuristic Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor to get revenge. The plot combines elements of science fiction and high school drama. The car, designed as a concept vehicle by Dodge, was worth over $500,000 and had to be returned undamaged. Multiple fiberglass replicas were made for the film's stunts. Not all survived. One tragic incident occurred when a camera car flipped during a take, killing assistant cameraman Bruce Ingram and permanently injuring another crew member. The accident resulted in several scenes being cut, and the movie's promotion was significantly scaled back. Despite this, the film gained cult status through VHS rentals in the late 1980s. Smokey and the Bandit, 1977, became one of the biggest hits of its year, second only to Star Wars at the box office. Directed by Hal Needham, a former stuntman, it starred Burt Reynolds, Sally Field, and Jackie Gleason. The plot involves a bet to illegally transport beer across state lines. Pontiac supplied 4 Trans Ams for the film, all of which were actually 1976 models modified to resemble the 1977 version. By the end of shooting, only one was still running. For the bridge jump scene, a rocket booster was installed to give the car enough lift. Funny, Gleason improvised many of his lines, including insults that later had to be dubbed for TV. In the broadcast version, "Sumbitch" was changed to "scumbum," a phrase that appeared on toys and merchandise afterward. Alfred Hitchcock reportedly screened the film in one of his final private viewings. Death Proof 2007, directed by Quentin Tarantino, was his tribute to 1970s grindhouse cinema. Kurt Russell stars as a former stuntman who turns his car into a murder weapon. The film is structured in 2 parts, each with its own pacing and tone. The first half is slow, methodical, and dialogue-driven, introducing the predator and his victims. The second half shifts into raw momentum, with a new group of women who aren't just passengers. They take control of the narrative and the chase. Zoe Bell, a real stuntwoman playing herself, performs a hood ride on a speeding Dodge Challenger in one of the film's most intense moments. There are no visual effects or safety tricks. She does it live, suspended over pavement at highway speed. Tarantino rejected modern equipment in favor of vintage cameras and added artificial film grain and scratches to recreate the texture of exploitation-era prints. The cars, especially the Dodge Challenger and the Chevy Nova, were chosen not for brand recognition, but for their history in earlier chase films. Every sequence was engineered with practical stunt logic, using 1970s techniques like bumper-mounted cameras and real-time blocking to keep the action grounded and immediate. These movies were made by people who cared more about what they could capture than how perfect it looked. The roads were real, the cars were real, and so were the risks. They didn't need permission to tell the stories they wanted. They just started filming. Every crash, every close call, every moment of silence between gears had weight because someone was actually behind the wheel. That's why they still hold up. Not because of polish, but because of commitment. Nothing about them was made to be safe. It was made to be felt.